So today we are talking about what a z-score is and also how to create a box plot. So the first thing is defining what a z-score is, and it's basically the number of standard deviations a value is away from the mean. So if I said that your z-score was 2.1, that means you were 2.1 standard deviations above average. If you have a negative z-score, then that means that you're below average. And why do we do this? It allows us to compare values with different scales, like the SAT and the ACT, and you can decide which one you actually did better on. So we're going to do that in a second. Here are the two different z-score formulas. You do need to have these memorized. The only difference between the two is just the notation. But basically, it's just your value minus the mean over the standard deviation. So I don't think it really makes a lot of sense until we apply it to something that matters to us. So basically, all ACTs and SATs are put onto a normal curve, which is whenever we have a z-score, it's always placed on a normal curve. And that's how your scores are actually created, is comparative to everyone else. So we have a normal curve for SAT and a normal curve for ACT. I did some extensive research and I found the average and the mean and the standard deviation for the entire nation. The only issue was that it was for the test taken in 2017. So I couldn't find any newer information. I've actually heard that scores are going down in average since then, but they haven't released any official information. So the average SAT score is 1060 with a standard deviation of 195 points. The average mean or the average score of the ACT is 20.7 with a standard deviation of 5.4. If you said that you got a 1200 on the SAT and you got a 23 on the ACT, you may report both of them to your college, but you may not realize which score did you actually do better on. So because 23 sounds good, but I can't equally compare that to my SAT score. So if I got a 1200 on the SAT and I got a 23, just by looking at it, which one would you think you did better on? The SAT or the ACT. I really have no idea. So what I want you guys to do, this is going to be application for you, is I want you to find your z-score. If you've taken both of them, then I want you to write down your scores, and I want you to calculate your z-score for both the SAT and the ACT. And you're not going to tell them to anybody. You can keep it a secret if you want. Or if you want to use my scores that I have, these aren't what I actually did, but if you want to use my scores, then we can see, did I do better on the ACT or the SAT? So the formula, do we remember what it is? Value minus mean over standard deviation. So I want you to find your z-score for your SAT, and I want you to find your z-score for the ACT. And this way you're going to know, okay, I actually did better on the ACT than I did the SAT, because what we're doing is we're taking both of our scores, we're putting them on an even playing field. This is how we're going to actually get to compare our scores, because they're on different scales. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes, and then we're going to take a poll to see which of us did better on the SAT, which of us did better on the ACT, and which one we should give to colleges. Yes.
How do you fraction bar on your calculator?
How do you what? So what would the z-score be for the Yankees?
How to do it?
2.36. Okay, and what about for the Phillies? So who actually did better? The Yankees. Which, it did turn out that way, but it's not always the higher number. Just depends.
And it could have been different because of the American and National League.
Right, so maybe the American League was just way better than the National League. So even though the Yankees have more runs compared to everybody else, they may not have actually had that good of a season because they were just in a really difficult league. So it would be like, say you're in a pre-AP class and you're in an on-level class, and you scored an 80 in your pre-AP, and you scored a 70 in your on-level. So you would automatically think an 80 was better, but maybe the average in your pre-AP class was a 95, and then your average in the on-level class was a 64. So you actually did better when you made the 70 than when you did the 80, compared to everybody in your class. Okay, the next thing is talking about percentiles and how we calculate those. So a percentile means, like if you're in the 85th percentile, what does that mean?
You're above 85% or equal.
I'm greater than or equal to 85% of the people. So I'm at the 85th percentile, I'm at or below. There's 85% at or below what I am. So to actually calculate that by hand or with a calculator, we are going to take the number of values less than myself. So let's say that there are 100 people in my class, and I am the 57th person in this line of 100 people. To find my percentile, I would take the 56 people that are below me, and then I would divide by the total number of people, which is 100, which would end up getting 0.56, and then I would multiply that times 100. So I would be in the 56th percentile. That means 56% are below what I am.
So you don't actually have to multiply that 100, you just change it to.
You can just move the decimal over. There are specific quartiles, and this is going to help us draw into when we start creating a box plot here in a second. If I reference the Q1, quartile 1, that means I'm in the 25th percentile. Q2 represents the median, and Q3 represents the 75th percentile. You're going to use these three numbers whenever you are calculating or creating your box plot. You guys might have already seen it whenever we were calculating the mean and the median. Have you guys seen it on your menu whenever you've typed in calculator, kind of? I'll refresh your memory today. And then the last thing is talking about the IQR, the interquartile range. To find that, you're going to take the third quartile minus the first, and it just represents the middle 50% of your data. We also say that this value is not affected by outliers. It is resistant. Okay, when you have finished writing that down, you have an example below that has a list of numbers, and I think the context of the problem is talking about collision insurance premiums or something. I didn't copy and paste the example, but what I want you to do is we're going to create a box plot from this set of data. So what I want you to do is take the data from this table, and I want you to type it into your calculator into list 1. And you're only going to make it one list, okay? So I'm going to do it myself. So to calculate whether you have an outlier, you're going to use these two beautiful formulas. These two beautiful formulas. So you're going to take your Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR, and you're going to take your Q3 and add 1.5 times the IQR. So we're going to do this with the data that we already have. I'm just going to insert two things for my lower fence. What was my Q1? 735 minus 1.5, and then my IQR was what? 3,033. Okay. And then for my upper fence, I'm going to take my Q3, which was 668 plus 1.5, 3933.
Wait, why do you add 1.5 and subtract 1.5? Like,
Because it's like
This is the outlier formula.
oh.
So I want you guys to do these two things in your calculator. Find these two numbers. And these are going to be considered my fences.
How do you back? You just start typing.
No, you're just doing this in your calculator. You don't need to do this in a list.
Yeah, how do you get back?
Oh, second quit.
You already just start typing.
I don't like how you can't do the parentheses like if you just you have to do it ahead of time. On the Inspire you can just
Mm.
you can type in the print. What are you talking about, Hunter?
no, you have to do the open parentheses and the closing
What if I
parentheses.
get a
On the
negative?
Inspire, you
That's
can do the
okay.
closed parentheses
So what
and
did you guys get for your lower fence?
No.
Oh, I never did that then.
What did you guys get for your lower fence? 5164.
Syntax here.
0.5. And then what did you get for your upper fence?
Exactly. You have to press the times button. I got negative 5,000.
10567.5.
Oh.
What did you say?
10567.5.
Okay. So we've got negative 5,000, and then we've got 10,567. So to make my box plot from this data, basically, do I have any values? So here's the negative 5167, and here is the 10,567.5. Do I have any values? Not yet. We are in a second. But do I have any values that are less than negative 5,000? No. Do I have any values that are greater than 10,567?
No.
Do I? I don't know. I haven't looked.
Yes.
I do.
Yes.
I have 21,000 something. 21. I can't read it. 147. So what that means is the 21,147 is considered an outlier. Okay? And that's the only value that is an outlier because it goes outside of my fences. Everything else is within the bounds, so it is not considered an outlier. So what we'll do to create this box plot, and I think, yeah, let's go ahead and go to example 13 because it actually has us solve for the outliers. We probably should have done this on the on here, but 13. So we said that 21,147 was an outlier. To create our box plot, everything that is within our bounds is considered either a whisker or a box, and then an outlier gets an individual dot. So what is my minimum value?
180.
180? 189?
No, just 180.
Okay, 180. Then I'm going to draw, what is my Q1?
735.
What is my median?
1,805.
1,805. And then what's my Q3?
4,668.
And then I've got an outlier at 21,167. What is,
They're not actually, but like 180 is not actually an outlier because there's a 189.
it's not, 180 is not considered an outlier because it's a part of the whisker. And then what is the value that is right, like the one that is below 21,167? 10,000, what is it? 10,034 is the next lowest one. Yeah, so I just went down to the one that was below that still fit within my fence.
Question.
If I want to actually make this on the calculator, because sometimes drawing it with a calculator is a little easier than drawing it by hand, then I'm going to go to, let me pull it up here.
Is that the max? That's not the maximum. What else was it?
The maximum is the 21,000, but it's an outlier. So to make it in the calculator, I'm going to go to second. I want everybody to do this with me. Second, y equals. Second, y equals. I want you to hit enter. Plot 1 should be turned on. And then you're going to scroll right to where this graph is highlighted. So it's a box plot with the dot.
So plot 1, right?
Uh-huh.
Can I click 1?
So plot 1 should be on. The type should be the bottom left-hand one.
No, first one.
Okay.
And then your X list should be L1 because that's what you have your data put in. Yes, it's the fourth one. Then from there, to get it to graph, you're going to hit the zoom button, which is right here next to the y
What did we
equals.
say for Mark?
Just keep it the way it is.
And then Z-Box.
Zoom, and then the number 9. That's zoom stat.
Wait, did we change it to on?
Zoom 9. Yes.
We changed it to on.
So if the arrow is longer on the right, it's a right skew. If they're the same on both sides, then it's symmetrical. If it's longer on the left, it's a left skew. The only, I guess, tricky part is that you have to draw all the way to the outlier. You don't just draw to the whisker. Okay. Do we feel okay with making a box plot?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to skip 14. I think if you want to try this one for practice, this is just calculating a z-score again. So maybe you could say practice, study for quiz or something. Number 15. This one, it doesn't give us the original data. It just gives us the 3 quartiles. The first thing says, provide an interpretation of these results. So if I were to interpret the Q1, what would I say in the context of this problem? So this is a summary of the crime rate per 100,000 people for all 50 states. The Q1 represents my what? 25th percentile. So I could say 25% of the states had a crime rate below 272.8 crimes. And then I guess it's per 100,000 people. What would that look like for Q2 and Q3? We don't need to write them all out, but what would that look like, or how would that be different?
It's 50 and 70%.
Q2 would be the 50%, would be below that number, and then the Q3 would be what? Yeah, 75%. The next one, it says determine and interpret the IQR. So what would that look like? Okay, so what 2 numbers am I subtracting? Minus. Good. And what does the IQR mean? What is the definition of the IQR? The middle 50%. So the middle 50% of the states had 256.9 crimes.
What is the middle 50%
It's like the range of the middle 50%. So I should probably put that range. So basically, if you've got your min and your max, and then here's my Q1 and here's my Q3. The range is your max minus your min. It's taking your biggest minus your smallest. The IQR is the range of your middle 50%. The reason why sometimes we calculate this instead of our max and our min is because it's basically like taking the outliers away and just looking at the range of the middle 50%. Sometimes outliers skew our data. So sometimes it's just helpful to look at the middle 50%. The violent crime rate in Washington, D.C. was 1,459. Would this be an outlier? How could I figure that out? Okay, which one would I, would this be an upper outlier or a lower outlier? An upper. So I only need to do one of the formulas. Q3 plus 1.5 IQR. So I want you guys to figure out what that upper fence would be. The upper fence value.
I got 786.
So you take 529.7 plus 1.5 times the IQR, which is 256.9. And you get 915 point what? 0.05. And so would 1,459 be an outlier? Yes. Anything past 915 would be an outlier. Okay, I want you to try number 16 with your table.
Oh, I got it.
Alright, you gotta do this.
Okay, next example. It wants us to interpret the percentiles. So let's just talk about them instead of writing them all down. What does it mean to be the fifth percentile?
You're at or below or above.
You're better than 5%.
So you're 6%.
No. Just means you're better than 5%. 95th percentile means you are better than 95% of
Or
the,
equal to.
yes. So basically females, newborn females that had a length of 53.8 is longer than 95% of the babies.
The length of your baby.
The length in centimeters, not. Okay, last one. I want you guys to try 18 with your table.
53 centimeters long.
So for the median, I said 16, but if you put like 15 or 17, I would still accept that. First quartile of Y, I said was at 22. Y had more spread, more dispersion. I looked at the IQR. You could have looked at the range as well. Does X have any outliers? Yes, it does at 28 or 29. And then the shape of Y is a left skew. How do I know that? How do I decide what a shape is?
From the first quartile to the minimum, medium is longer.
Yep, so I'm going to put a line in the median, draw lines out to the outsides. It's longer on the left, so it is a left skew.